I'm excited to present our next presenter. His name's Rey Descalso. He runs a wealth management group called Privata Wealth. He left the bigger Wall Street firms because he didn't think that they provided enough client-first focus. And he's an expert in building relationships and really leading teams better than pretty much everybody I know. But he's also the board chair for the Florida Hospital on Metabolic Disorders, and he has a master's in divinity, which kind of lends a unique perspective. So thank you for joining us, Rey. I'm really excited for you to kind of take us through kind of how to develop the culture of success in business. So thank you for sharing with us today.
Hey man, thank you for having me. This looks really good to my parole officer. He's super pumped I'm here because, community service, digging ditches, this kind of thing obviously will help, will definitely help. So culture of success, that's a really good question. And I don't really think that there's necessarily a one-size-fits-all answer, but let me give you some principles that have worked for me. There's two things you got to worry about. You got to worry about the quality of the inputs and the quality of the outcomes. So let's just say you got a team and your job is to dig ditches. Well, ultimately you cannot necessarily promise that you're going to be able to dig this ditch a certain amount of feet deep by the end of the day. You could hit bedrock, you could strike oil, you could hit gold. Who knows? Maybe there really is something down there. You hit a pipe. The outcome is not really something that you can hold your team accountable to because there's so many external factors. I mean, there's deadlines and there's all these different things that we put on ourselves, but we can't really truly promise the output, the outcome. But what we can do is we can figure out a way to create a way to measure and a way to reward and a way to incentivize the input, the amount of things you do. Let me give you an example. Every morning at 10 a.m., I meet with 5 other business owners just like myself on the phone. We've been doing this since 2011, January of 2011. All of these people, don't tell them this, all of these people are about 3 times as successful as I am. They're also about 3 times as old as I am too. I mean, they're 120 each. So as vampires, they should be more successful than me. But beyond being undead, they're also committed to measuring their success. And they're these people are people who, in my industry, you can look them up and they rank, so to speak, in our trade. And here they are on a phone call with a guy who is about 1/3 of his way through their career. And here they are at the last innings of their career, and they're still measuring their outcomes. Don't get me wrong, they like making money, they like being successful, they like being, all those other things. But you know how they get to those outcomes? By measuring their inputs. And so every morning, the 4 of us get on that phone call, 5 of us actually. And what we end up doing is we end up going through the metrics that we came up with that we're testing ourselves on. So for instance, number of phone calls is a metric that we measure. Now, they're not your normal, we're not just smiling and dialing, random people in the phone book, but they're strategic phone calls that we agreed on. Every quarter we agree on, this is what I'm going to do. And by the way, it's not just work related. It's also family time. It's also the things that make our success sustainable. Having that call every morning at 10 a.m. Makes me more aware and in touch with my inputs in my life and my outputs. Then you take that and do the same thing with your team. You say, hey team, here's the outcome that I want. I want us to climb that mountain over there. What's it going to take? Let's break it down into steps. And I cannot promise you that the weather on Mount Everest is going to be favorable on the day that we launch our first or second or third attempt.
Right.
But can measure the fact that we were prepared, that we were packed, that we, whatever it is. I've never climbed Mount Everest before, so that was a horrible analogy. I really should work on one of the inputs is work on your analogies every day to become more successful. Is quit coming up with crappy analogies whenever you're being interviewed by the great Joel Goldstein. So that's one thing I'm going to add to my list for my 10 o'clock call. So inputs and outputs, do it yourself. That's one other thing about culture of success. You can't really fake it. If you have a culture of success and one of those cultures is integrity and honesty, you got to walk it. And I know that's pretty much basic, but you think about it. If you are asking your people on your team to work hard, then you don't have to work hard, but you better make noises when you close the door so they think you're working hard, because ultimately you've got to model everything. In fact, I will say this. The culture you have now is really just your DNA. Now, obviously, as you go further out in your industry or further out in your company, if it's really large, your DNA has less and less of an effect. But the tighter your circle is actually a reflection of you. So when you go home and you complain to, your cat and tell your cat about how bad your coworkers are, your subordinates, your superiors, your team, the reality of it is it's you, and you control it, and let that DNA spread. And the reason that a culture of success is so important is because if you're the business owner, if you're the entrepreneur, it is your DNA. Obviously, it's what scales. It is the stem cell. Your culture is the stem cells of your organization. And if you are the one who's growing it, then careful what you're growing, because it's either something beautiful or it's cancer.
That's very Freudian. But one of our members asked a really poignant question. He said, "I don't believe in the kumbaya stuff, but I believe in working hard and building something I can be proud of. How can I get the best out of my team, as they work?"
Yeah, that's a great question. All right, so if you don't believe in the kumbaya stuff, go buy a book called Never Split the Difference by, I can't remember his name now. It'll come to me as I'm talking. He was a chief negotiator for the FBI.
I'll put it in the link below.
Yeah, great book. I've listened to the book on tape like twice, read it once, and I still find new things about it. So when someone takes a hostage, all right, they've got the hostage, and I won't give away too much of the book because obviously it's worth a read, and I'm not going to do a great job anyways. But when they take a hostage and they say, "Hey, I just kidnapped Joel Goldstein," they call your wife and they say, "Hey, I want $1 million." Well, the reality of it is there's a bunch of things that you can say and you can do. But what they found is that the hostage takers, they need to make getting the $1 million their problem, not your problem. So your wife should respond, "Well, how do you expect me to do that?" So here I am on the phone. I got my ski mask on. Well, I guess I wouldn't have my ski mask on if we're on the phone, but let's say we're Skyping. And I'm like, "I got Joel here, and he's dead if I don't get $1 million in a helicopter by noon tomorrow." All she has to say is, "Well, how do you expect me to do that?" And all of a sudden, she did not say anything to me as a hostage taker that really makes me upset, because truly, I have no idea how she's supposed to do that.
Right.
And now, guess whose problem it is? It's my problem. And then I say, hold on a second. How about $250,000? And so that's how the negotiation starts. And then finally, one of the things that you would say is, well, how do I even know if Joel's alive? You constantly make the hostage taker also the responsibility taker for what he's gotten himself into.
Interesting.
So if you don't like the kumbaya stuff, which by the way, that was the problem with all of the Harvard negotiations with terrorists, is that they were all kumbaya. What you got to do is you go to those people who are in your organization and you feel like you're not getting enough out of them, and you ask them, "Hey, Joel, we've been working together. You as my chief lieutenant now for about a year. And I really don't feel like I'm getting 100% out of you. What should I do?" And so all of a sudden, Joel, his head's spinning, but he's now seeing things from your position, and he's now realizing, well, I mean, let's be honest, my job's up. This is a threatening conversation couched in the best possible way where I take ownership. And now Joel, the subordinate, the team member, whatever you want to call him, is now in control of the situation, and in charge of and responsible for making it happen. And now that can be, I can spin that kumbaya, I want to empower you, Joel, to really just reach for the stars. No, it's not about that. It's about, I'm not getting what I want. What should I do? If you were in my shoes, Joel, what would I have to do to get the best out of you? Right. And then what will end up happening is, to the team member who's asking this question, you're going to find the actual weak spot is that there's something that Joel is dealing with that I probably can actually help. It might be me. It might be the tools I've given him to complete his job. He needs more training. He needs to go back to school for this or that, whatever the case may be. We'll get to the bottom of it, but it has to be owned by Joel, because man, if you come in there and just say, "I'm the boss, you're the subordinate, dig faster and dig deeper,"
right?
That's not a culture you want.
That's a great point, and it really brings me to my next question. Since you work with so many leaders in their business, in their industry, what are some of the biggest mistakes that companies make when it comes to building that company culture that you've seen?
Yeah, well, two things. I think too many people, when they do Skype calls, they don't have a kick-ass sky view in the background. I think that's number one. You have that, I mean,
you're set.
That's it. That's it. You're set. So I think that's number one thing. The number two thing is, you know, back in the 80s, Japan was eating our lunch. And the reason Japan was eating America's lunch is because we would have quarterly goals as companies, and they would have 5-year goals. Okay? And so I think Stephen Covey, you know, he illustrates it best, where, you know, you're in charge of making copies at a company, right? And so what you do is in this next quarter, you don't spend any money on maintenance of the coffee machine, and you just crank out as many copies as you possibly can, and you never go down for rest. You never really retool it, never put oil in the machine. Yeah. And people see your amazing success. You get promoted. The next guy comes in. Let's call him Joel. He's a good name. Joel comes in and says, "Hey, man, Ray did a great job here. I'm here to keep it going." And that day he starts, the coffee machine breaks. Ultimately, I think, you know, we've all been in business for, depending on what we're doing. I've been in business a long enough time now that if I could get a time machine and go back, you know, back 12 years ago when I started this business, what I would tell myself was, don't worry about the short term. Hard to say to an entrepreneur, hard to say to a business owner, hard to say to somebody who's climbing the corporate ladder. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the short term sacrifices never seem to work. And that's true not just of you know, how you spend your resources, but also how you spend your relationships. Game of Thrones is a fantastic TV show. Love it. However, if that's how you want to be in real life, it's going to last about as long as those characters. In fact, do that. Go watch Game of Thrones and ask yourself, who do I want to be? I don't want to give it away. No spoiler alerts here in case you haven't watched it. But you want to be the guy who plays the long game. And going back to the kumbaya, you know, the best cons and the con artists in the world are the ones who play the long con, you know, who are looking for the long-term deal. Well, in a positive light, those are the true successes. The guys and the gals who are looking for doing this for a very long time. People pick up on that, and teams pick up on that. Clients and customers and suppliers and vendors, they pick up on that. And that's a little kumbaya. I wish I could give you some better examples, but think about the long term.
No, I think that's a great perspective, because so much of what we do, especially in retail, is about the next quarter and, you know, the next session. You know, you really got to kind of focus short term, but keeping that long term goal in mind is that incredibly important. And I think you're right; it does come through in those conversations. You know, what I'm planning in 5 years, where I want to be in 10. One question that I had was, you know, how do you get your team, you know, to go above and beyond when you're kind of pushing those goals, when you want to hit that quarter, when you want to do that? How do you get your team to really put in, you know, more than just a day's work, but really feel kind of invested in what you're doing?
Yeah, you know, I think it's difficult. Let me back up. So I've had different experiences in my career and leadership and in different facets of my life. One of the things, and I don't know who said it, but I've heard it time and again, so I'll say it again here: hire slow, fire fast. Okay, now that seems a bit drastic, but if you look at the people you bring on board, it should be the most painful thing you do is to add to your team. It should take you so long. You should be stressed out about it, because, you know, it's like getting married. You know, those people you work with, and I would even say of hiring vendors and suppliers is also a similar dance. That obviously sometimes you got to do it because you got to do it, but you want to really have a courtship phase. So I would hire very, very slow. And then somebody else who said this, and I don't know who it was, it's not me. Hire slow, fire fast. Yeah. So, you know, I would say the reality of it is if you've got a larger team, and you feel like somebody, after having talked with them a bit, isn't working, you gotta let them go. And that's not kumbaya. That is cold-blooded, but it's also principled, and it has to be documented. It has to be done in a correct manner that fits your culture. You're not trying to instill fear in your minions. What you're trying to do is you say, hey, this is not a place that this person's going to be happy, because a happy person here is just, you know, is playing pickup basketball. Yeah. When I go and play pickup basketball with somebody, I'm not like, oh man, I gotta play 5 more minutes. I'm like, oh man, I gotta go home. My mom's calling. Right. You know, you remember the days when you rode your bike and the sun was going down, you could hear your mom screaming? That's how you want people to be at work. And if they're not happy doing that, either change where they're sitting on the company bus to a better seat that suits them, or tell them, hey, go find a better bus. And that's number one thing that you got to do. And when you do that, I think it kind of wakes up everybody, and have that discussion on your team. Like, this is why we're doing this. There's no vitriol. There's no malice toward anyone. It's getting people who feel like they're playing pickup basketball, people who love the game that they're in and are suited best to it. If someone's there for a job where they're clocking in, it's not a fit for them. Having said that, there are going to be times when I have to do something because of the nature of my business that I'm not good at and that I don't want to do. And I'm sorry, I just have to do it. That's the toughest part. And the toughest part with that type of thing is to share your own story about the fact that you struggle with it, and let them know that it doesn't matter. It's something that you're going to push through. And being honest with your own metrics as a leader in your company and saying, this is my issue, then you can come and say, hey, Joel, listen, I realize that we're doing inventory for the next 6 weeks, and you're gonna have to stay late and count widgets. I just want to say that I know that sucks, and I talked to you about the things that I don't like, and so I want to say thank you so much for getting this done, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about making it more efficient. Let's talk about giving you some sort of bonus or way of rewarding you. Let's talk about it now, because it's easy as a business owner, as the boss, as a team leader, to say, you know what, I'm the boss, do it, because that's easy to say, but man, you get nowhere with it.
Yeah, and that leads me into my next member question, which was, how to keep a team on track, especially when working with younger people in an organization, because it seems like, they're always on the cell phones.
Yeah. So that's a tough one. That's a tough one, especially with the millennials. And also, too, 80% of what they're doing on their phones might be legit. It might be something that is work-related, and it can also increase their productivity. I think it goes back to what we started out saying in the very beginning, which is the quality of inputs versus quality of outputs, number one. So obviously, if they are hitting those metrics, those numbers that you want, that's awesome. And then secondarily, I think what you got to do is you got to figure out to where, it gets back to really just getting some boundaries in there, to where we say, look, we're gonna go dark at these times. One of the biggest problems that we have in the workplace is constant interruptions. Yeah, it drives me. I know it drives my staff bonkers when I will just, blurt out, I think we should do this, and they're in some project that I told them was already top priority, and I just, their face are like, oh, if you weren't the boss, I would just tell you off, because this is so super annoying. And guess what? I do it to them as well. They're like, hey, where is the TPS reports filed? And I'm like, I'm writing an email, very important email. Didn't you see that kind of thing? So one of the things that we do at our office is we do the Pomodoro technique, where you take 20 minutes of don't bother me, 10 minutes of bother me. And I try to get 3 or 4 Pomodoro seconds in. And what that is, it's a little tomato timer. You can use your iPhone. And what I would recommend that you do, what we do is I'll shut my door, or they'll shut their doors, and you just don't bother them. Phone calls, they're in an appointment. You shut your email down and you get some work done. If it fits in your business, I would recommend you have, whether it be 50 minutes with 20 minutes off kind of thing, you have those, because it's been shown time and time again, the Pomodoro technique and you can modify it to what you're doing in the 20 minutes and the 10, and you can also modify the time amounts that make sense. But having that, I know I'm going to check my email in 20 minutes. I know I'm going to check my Facebook, my Instagram, whatever. And I know my jerk of a boss isn't taking it away. He's just trying to focus me in this ADD, attention-starved world. And I think it's fair. I think it's fair, because you're paying them to do a job.
I think that's a great example. And I think, as we keep going, we get more and more things placed on our desk. We're responsible for more and more going on, especially with a growing company in retail. This is one of those things that they're always working with. They got to work on their website, they got to work on their EDI. What would you say the best thing that a company can do, today to prepare for success this year could be? What can they do to set up today to prepare themselves to really hit those inputs and outputs this year?
Yeah, that's a great point. Great question. So 2018, what could you do now to make sure that you are on track for success? what I would recommend that you do, going back to the inputs and outputs, is I would take a look at your team calendar and how you're spending every single day. And what you want to do is you want to take a look at that calendar with the idea that you have no days where you're doing more than 2 themed activities. Okay. So for instance, you mentioned the website. Now this is going to be different for everybody. Okay. Everybody's business model is a little different in what they do, but what I'm finding is that if I have a day where I am talking to vendors, when I have a day when I'm talking to suppliers, of the week, I'm talking about Monday is the day I focus on this. If Friday is the day that I'm following up with the trivia of owning a business, running a business, whatever, and that could be literally running payroll or paying the bills or arguing with the landlord or whatever it happens to be. Mm-hmm. And then if I make my Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday core days where I am working on the things that only I am good at, if I map out my entire day and I communicate that to my team, all of a sudden, the focus of my day is so much stronger. It's kind of like a Pomodoro technique for your entire week. And of course, what you would do is you would go to your team members and see how could we do that for them. And I'm of the opinion, and what I've noticed is, other than maybe perhaps support personnel, we could literally give people a day a week where they could stare at the ceiling and think of new ideas and think of processes and procedures in their realm, because it free up so much more time. Most of those things that you're doing that are themed and are like trivial, so to speak, they can be kicked off to another day. And I think by taking your weeks and making theme days, and then of course maybe theme months and theme weeks in there, that's huge. I would take 3 or 4 days of review at the beginning of every quarter to look back personally yourself and then as a team, because that helps you to constantly, you got to take this time weekly and monthly and quarterly to review where you're really at, not just the metrics of numbers, but also the mechanics of processes and flows of how your work gets done. And then also too on team building and so forth. I think if you do more introspection as an entrepreneur in retail, ironically, it sounds kumbaya, but that's where the genius ideas come. I mean, the other day I was taking a shower, well, maybe it was 3 or 4 days. I don't take a shower every day because I'm organic. But anyways, the other day I was taking a shower and I noticed that I just had this brilliant idea. And turns out it really was, in my opinion anyway so far, a brilliant idea. And it was a phone call to a particular person that was just the right thing to say at just the right time. Why did it happen in the shower? Because it's in the shower, you're going through a routine, is where your creative processes can speak to you. Whereas when you're stressed out about an email, about a deadline, about something got lost in shipping in Beijing, you're not going to be creative. You're not going to solve complex problems. And so what I'm saying is take a shower at work, basically. Modify that obviously to be more of a purposeful downtime to let the creative solutions to complex problems, to fixing things, to optimizing things, and to increasing your efficiency and your relationship with your team on those days.
I think that's great advice, and I actually put it into effect last year. Completely changed our output this year. So it definitely does work. And I like that.
So you use those theme days?
We did. We took our Mondays and our Fridays. I spaced out time on my calendar to actually work on the business and take a step back and look at what's been going on. And we've been able to implement some really revolutionary changes that haven't been done before. So
that's crazy.
That's great advice, and
and you and I
second
by the
that.
way, full disclosure, you and I have not talked about that before this call. So that's kind of kismet,
It is kismet. Well, very good. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're running around, but I appreciate you coming on.
Love it, Joel. Thanks for the opportunity, man.